Hey everyone, it's me, Randy. I didn't think I would be back this soon after recording my return episode 2 days ago, but I'm several hours away from going on my flight to the Bay Area with my mom, and I figured I have some time to kill. Why not record another episode? So here I am. And what I want to talk about is my recent journey to learning Vietnamese as a now 42-year-old, as a geriatric millennial. And I recently wrote about that on my Substack a month ago, and I got a lot of responses from fellow Vietnamese folks and also from other folks who are learning their family language for the first time or who have felt the shame of not being able to speak their family native tongue. And I realized how less alone I felt in this journey of trying to reclaim a language that I had lost over the years, decades. And it started when I was 5 years old. I was already the first one born on both sides of my family in the US. I remembered my parents speaking to me in Vietnamese, my mom specifically, and my dad speaking to me in Cambodian Khmer. And both of my parents my dad could speak both languages, and he also spoke English very well. And my mom is specifically a Vietnamese speaker and really did not speak English very well at all. And so when I was 5 years old, I saw that change for me very quickly. I was going to a school that had no Vietnamese speakers, that had no Cambodian speakers, that I had no one that really looked like me. And my dad, all of a sudden, was pushing me to learn English. He told me that this was the only opportunity I had to become successful in America. And unfortunately, he was not wrong in that assessment. And so I got drilled having to learn English. My first year in kindergarten, I barely spoke 20 words all year from what my kindergarten teacher wrote on my report card. And I was terrified. I was terrified of speaking. I was terrified of of trying to fit in. And I was very confused. I was trying to navigate this other reality of being in a school and in my environment that I had to learn a new culture from. While back home, my parents were just trying to make ends meet and not being able to understand the world around them, or at least having to learn the world around them the way I was learning. So it was it was a very confusing time when I look back on it. My brothers and I felt like we had to it felt like we had to, or we were forced to abandon our family native tongue in order to survive in America. And it would later come at a cost. I would go to family gatherings or or my parents' friend outings, and they would ask my mom, could Randy speak Vietnamese? And she would always say, no, Randy cannot speak Vietnamese. And then they would look at me with a sad look on their face or this disappointed look on their face and say, oh, I'm very sorry. And that was a feeling that I had to deal with each and every time. And this reminder that I'm not one of them, that I am this person to take pity on because I could not speak my parents' native tongue. I would go to my grandparents' home, and my grandfather would try to talk to me, and I did not know what to say back to him. I remember one day I was sitting on my grandparents' bench outside of their home, and my grandpa would sit next to me, and I remember feeling scared. And my grandpa would start having a conversation with me for about several minutes. You know, he put his arms around me, and I would look down, and I did not know what to say. I did not know what he was saying. And when I look back, I always wondered what my grandpa was trying to tell me, and what I wish I could have said in return. He would die right before my 13th birthday, and I always wondered what my relationship would have been like in my early years had I been able to even communicate with him. My grandma, on the other hand, my mom, would have to tell my grandma that I can't speak, or my brothers and I can't speak the language, and my grandma would feel this shame, this sadness that I couldn't do it. And my grandma could not speak English, and I was 35 years old when she finally passed away. And she was dealing with dementia for several years prior to her death. But still, I thought, man, for all these years, even as a full grown adult, I had every opportunity to somehow have a conversation with my grandma, and I failed. And that was something that I had a very hard time living down. I would sometimes go with my mom to the grocery store, or go to community centers or family homes, and even my own Vietnamese speaking friends, and she would remind them that I can't speak Vietnamese. And I remembered being so angry at her one time in the car, and I told her, well, that is your fault for not teaching us how to speak Vietnamese. I would do the same to my dad. And their regret became deepened when I would remind them about my language losses due to their quote unquote unwillingness to teach me. My mom had a stroke in 2012, and I was coming back from Korea. I was 28 years old at the time, and my mom, by that point, had already been able to speak English. She was able to pick up, and I was able to have good conversations with her. But after her stroke, part of her language abilities in both Vietnamese and English were limited, and it affected how I was able to be an effective caregiver and also as a son to her. I struggled to have deeper conversations with her. I had a hard time trying to explain to her about what she needed to do after I took her to the doctor, or going to the dentist. And I would feel that reminder time and time again. Man, how much would my life be impacted had I learned how to speak? But part of it was also from the fact that I didn't want to learn, because I felt this I felt this resentment, this anger from the community when I had to deal with the constant shaming and the constant, like, well, you can't speak it, or you're never good enough to learn it, or that your Vietnamese is very broken. It sounds like I can't understand you. And the first time I went to Vietnam with my uncle back in 2009, when I turned 26 years old, I remembered the waiters, the hotel staff, taxi drivers telling me that you should learn how to speak Vietnamese, and I was getting shamed from everyone when I was in Ho Chi Minh City to my family village. And as much as I appreciated my first visit, I was also very turned off by it at the same time. And I did not have a desire to go back to Vietnam for many years. And as I as the years have continued, I slowly decided to get into the Cambodian and Vietnamese spaces in my 30s in Chicago. I became a board member for the National Cambodian Heritage Museum. I was trying to overcompensate by trying to be active in communities, in my family's communities, to show that at least I'm trying my best to connect with my culture. I sometimes grew very jealous of my mom's side of the family, my cousins specifically, for them being able to speak Vietnamese. And also my dad's side of the family, my older cousins that could speak both Vietnamese and Cambodian. So I felt this inadequacy, this burden weighing on me every time I've been in those spaces, even as I continued to step into leadership roles. And when I eventually began the Banh Chronicles podcast, when I started interviewing Vietnamese creatives and other Southeast Asian creatives, and thinking that maybe that was enough to make up for the lack of language that I could not do. But I realized that wasn't enough. I needed to go further. And it wasn't until I went to Vietnam and Cambodia last December. And when I went to Vietnam, I was pretty surprised at how people younger than me were able to speak English, but also did not shame me for not being able to speak Vietnamese. They were empathetic, they were understanding. And during that time, I felt that I wanted to connect more with other Vietnamese folks and also deepen my relationship with my current Vietnamese and Cambodian friends. I felt that maybe it is time for me to learn. It is time for me to go further, to maybe make connections that I would not make if I commit myself to the Vietnamese language. So I decided that Vietnamese was going to be my goal. And in June, I took lessons through Preply. I was getting tutored 2 to 3 times a week by a South Vietnamese tutor, and learning the different ways of trying to understand and being able to speak the language. And I could tell you it was not very easy. Vietnamese is a very tonal language. One little inflection or one different tone of one letter or vowel can make a huge difference, and that took a lot of practice. I was surprised at how the grammar was easy to work with because it's similar to English with the subject, verb, object arrangement in some cases, and it didn't feel as complicated as I thought. And so I gradually started to learn new words and also put things together. Sometimes the help of Google Translate was able to allow me to, um, be able to look up certain words that I did not have knowledge to. And I also chatted with other native Vietnamese speakers online, and they were willing to correct me or willing to recommend another way of me saying it. And so I realized how me learning Vietnamese has enabled me to to better my relationships with the community, and also what it did for me personally. I came in June with maybe a very, very basic level of Vietnamese. I think I only knew words. I didn't know how to do sentences. And 2 months later, I'm already starting to have basic conversations and speaking in sentences and starting to get off the training wheels of not having to read from a script and being able to just record myself on TikTok, just being able to speak, broken tongue and all. But yeah, I gotta say, I'm very proud of myself. I'm very proud of the progress that I made so far. I am eager to start texting in Vietnamese to my friends, and just yesterday I had a conversation with my younger cousin, and we talked about how he was considered a bad Vietnamese speaker for his family, even though I knew he could speak it. And he was so excited when I started talking to him about about um, about some of the sentences I knew and the questions I was asking. He's like, "Yeah, man, I can actually understand you. You're actually starting to get it down." And he was really geeked out, and I was very proud. It was pretty awesome. And I haven't told my mom that I've been learning Vietnamese yet, but since I'm gonna go to San Jose, which is a large Vietnamese community, yeah, I'm going to try to surprise her by, going to a restaurant and start speaking Vietnamese a little bit, and she'll be surprised at what I know. And but all it took for me was to realize that I had to get past the shame. This 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 expectation of trying to be fluent. I had to get rid of the expectation that I may never be fluent, and that's okay. I had to get rid of the past shame of those reminders of not being enough, and that I'm a lost cause. And I think what I want to say is that to everyone who is trying to deal with the language loss, we we can learn in our own journey, whether we choose to or not. We are still we are still part of a family's culture, and that there's no correct way to fit in. I think my friend once said to me, there's 1 million ways to be Cambodian, and there's no correct way to be one particular. And as I'm learning a different way to be a Vietnamese Khmer American. I'm learning to slowly dissolve this lifelong shame, but also to reclaim what I had lost. and to also recognize that, having to assimilate into a society in order to survive. um, I wanted to also be able to go back and be able to do things on my own terms this time. So I hope that as I progress into this journey, I will continue to deepen my connections, but also to seek out the connections that I've been looking for all this time. And I got to give myself a lot of grace along the way. And I hope that for anyone learning this language, learning their family language, that I hope you give yourself a lot of grace. So, with that said, thank you.